Hello and welcome to Chess Please. My name is Andy and today I'm going to show you 9 chess terms and idioms that will make you a better chess player by understanding them. Let's jump in. So the first term is pigs on the 7th or piggies on the 7th, whichever you prefer, and that refers to these two rooks combining on the 7th rank, or it can also be on the 2nd rank if you're playing as black, but basically hemming in the king like this and just lording it over black's position, just hemming them right back, and the two rooks defending each other the whole time. They're two best pals, piggies on the 7th, and you'll just see here this sort of dominance because you can engineer a checkmate pretty easily with the king here. So you just really have to make sure that at every stage you're trying to get your rooks away from the king, and while you're doing that you can hoover up every single piece on the 7th rank. Piggies on the 7th. Next one. So our next term is biting on granite, and this one I've lifted from my favourite chess YouTuber is Daniel Naroditsky, and he often refers to biting on granite as it can refer to any piece that is suboptimally placed or staring down either a chain of pawns or generally just an unfavourable position they can't crack into. Most often you'll hear it referred to is a bishop staring into a pawn chain like this, staring at the point of the pawn chain, and it gives the feeling of biting on granite. There really isn't a great way for the bishop to make any headway into that solid fortified structure, so you really want to avoid your pieces biting on granite, particularly those bishops staring into a pawn chain. They're biting on granite. Next one. So our next term is an octopus, and an octopus refers to a knight that is positioned in its perfect position in the center of the board where it can reach 8 different squares at once. And forgive me, this is a little risky to draw the odd time, but I think we'll be okay. Just like this, hopefully that all makes sense. So now he has 8 squares to attack, and the reason it is so heralded, obviously controlling squares in chess is like owning hotels in Monopoly. People can't land there without your permission. And compare that to the knight in its worst square, which is in the corner. It only has 2 legal moves, controls the least real estate possible. So this is a knight on the rim, which is dim, but we've also got the octopus in the center of the board. Next one. So our next term is called pushing wood, and it is one of many terms in chess that sounds vaguely raunchy, but honestly pushing wood just refers to playing moves without any purpose or intention. So just shuffling along the game, just moving because you can. You're just pushing wood around the board, and it's something you definitely want to avoid. I think with every move you should be able to explain to someone why you've made that move. I think that's just a good rule of thumb. Before you make a move, rather than just pushing wood around the board, think about how you would explain that move to someone if they asked about it, as a good way to avoid pushing wood. Next one. So our next term is the poisoned pawn, and a poisoned pawn refers to a pawn that looks beautifully appetizing and undefended and juicy and free to take, but in reality by taking that pawn it's actually a pretty big mistake and you're doing more harm than good for your position. So here we see that the bishop has moved out to d3, leaving the g2 pawn undefended, and very often you'll find that the g2, b2, g7 and b7 pawns are referred to as poison pawns very often, because if you take, you actually end up weakening your position quite a lot, because you win a pawn for sure, but now this bishop is kind of pinned to this other poison pawn, this other defenseless pawn, but taking that with a rook is a lot more dangerous than taking that with the bishop, and the bishop has to skedaddle and just head on back home, and now we have this beautiful open file that we can use for the rest of the game. And that's one example of a poison pawn, a pawn that looks free and tempting, but you absolutely should not take it. Next one. So our next maneuver is the can opener, and a can opener refers to very often this H pawn, but generally a pawn push that is used to just crack open, chisel into your opponent's position, very often against a kind of a fianchettoed kingside king like this. So let's take a look at this example. We see the H4 push, we see the G4 push, also known as a pawn storm, but a can opener just has that nice evocative feel of just using that one small piece to pierce the opponent's position. This is from a Grandmaster game between Karyakin and Rajabov, and in this position White did manage to gain some material and completely destroy Black's kind of kingside defenses, or certainly leave it a lot more vulnerable with that can opening procedure. Next one. So next one, I like to think of this as the spiritual opposite of an octopus knight, and this is a big pawn or a tall pawn, and this refers to a bishop that has been hemmed in by its own pawns and basically has all the functionality and purpose of a pawn because it's hemmed in. Now, this is the most extreme example of a big pawn where the bishop is literally trapped and nothing that happens in the game really is going to solve this. But there are more gentle examples where a bishop is just, say, in the middle of the board and they got pawn here, and they just are hemmed in by their own pieces. But that's a big pawn, a tall pawn, whatever you like. Next one. So this next term is called trousers, and this is from Daniel Daraditzky's video series on pawn technique in endgames. And trousers refers to two passed pawns that are 3 or more files away from each other, that the king can't put both legs into those trousers. Those trousers are too big for the king. So if we see an example like this play out, where we see the king is sort of jostled around, and now these two trouser legs, they're too big for this king. I don't quite get why they're called trousers, because you do put 2 legs into trousers, but this king doesn't have enough legs, doesn't have wide enough legs to get into them trousers, and he's in big trouble with them trousers. And finally, we have probably my favourite term, although I do have a nit to pick with this term, and that is the Greek gift sacrifice. So the Greek gift sacrifice refers to very often sacrificing your bishop and taking this h7 pawn in order for an overwhelming attack. So again, it's a sacrifice of this bishop to crack into the position. King takes, knight comes on in, queen swans in with check, king moves back, and that's checkmate. All from what looks like a pretty normie-dormy, like no frills position. You reach this place here. This could happen in 1,000 games you play, but just always keep an eye out for a pretty vacant king side, castled king, and just see what happens when you crash through with your bishop. Just keep an eye out for it. That's the Greek gift sacrifice. The nit I have to pick with it is, in the term, obviously referring to the kind of the Trojan horse that the Greeks give. That's a horse that cracks in, and there are horses in this game, but you don't use the horse to crack in. You use the bishop. So a very minor foible, but hopefully it cements the memory all the same. So those are my 9 terms that I think will make you a better chess player by understanding them. They refer to general concepts and positional sort of devices that you can use to know where to put your pieces and know what to avoid potentially. Hopefully you found that enjoyable. I would love to hear some of your terms or little shorthand metaphors and similes that you use to kind of help keep track of everything in this baffling game. That's all from me today, folks. If you didn't do it, feel free to subscribe and stick around. You'll make my day. All the very best. Take it easy.